30, 29, 28. No, I'm not going to do
Rusty,
that.
sing the music for it.
What is the music?
I don't know. It's like mechanical.
It's something weird, but how's everybody doing tonight? Welcome to the AV Experience. We are Michael-less tonight because he is off on some ocean on a cruise. Hopefully he doesn't fall off. He was talking about or threatening to fall off last podcast, but hopefully we'll have Michael back.
Maybe he'll see your speaker or your room out there on the water.
Maybe. I don't know if he departed through Houston and be like, "Hi, Ryan's room." Yeah. So hopefully everybody's had a good week so far. We're joined this weekend by Kevin ChldsPlay on the forum. He's going to be one of the experience rooms at this year's Midwest AV Experience. Kevin, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
Good. Surviving. I'm getting more and more anxious as MWAVE gets closer and my room is still not done.
Yeah.
Just palpable. However that word is in my home with the anxiety. But Rusty, Jonathan, how are you?
I'm good. I'm same as you. I realized my wife, I'm not terribly aware of time until there's a deadline. And then all of a sudden she reminded me that MWAVE is in 2 weeks. I'm like, no, it's not in 2 weeks. It's at least a month away. And
2 weeks.
No kidding. Like we're driving up on Tuesday the 18th. So 2 days.
Technically the event is in 3 weeks, but we have to start getting here and everything in 2 weeks.
So it is near and present.
Jonathan, you're building a riser.
Yeah. Well, I was in Pennsylvania with family on vacation, and then we decided to get the Nearfield subs back. So my subs are unstacked from the towers, and I got my 5 up front, my 3 Nearfield, and then I have to make a shorter step riser. So
this was what ended up winning out. Just the OG setup was what you've decided to return.
Yeah, I mean, so there's benefits and detriments to both, and I think I've talked about it on one of the got a hair on my mic. I've talked about it on one of the other podcasts where the towers have like a very strong impulse response, like where you feel a wave of bass because everything's really time aligned if you're in that center seat, because the towers are exactly 12.1 foot away according to the receiver, and both of them are exactly the same. And man, those waves just hit you so strong, too strong. So I was watching some of my demo clips that I'm really familiar with and really love at reference volume, and it was like, it was that pressurization where you're like, you feel like you're deep into the pool, at the bottom of the pool, and it's uncomfortable. And I don't like that.
Uncomfortable for you.
Well, in the main listening position, like I wasn't even enjoying myself. I was like, this is painful. And you could turn the subs down. You can turn the subs down, obviously. Like you don't have to have the subs as loud, but I want that tactile. And to get the tactile with the far field, the subs need to be where they were, and then it was uncomfortable. So this gives me the tactile feel with the near field without having it as loud. And my impulse response probably on a graph is not as clean. So as odd as this is, I probably prefer a little bit less accurate sound than that wave that just kind of like punishes you.
No, but your uniformity is probably more consistent across the room.
I would agree with that. It probably is better seat to seat consistent, but all this that I'm kind of complaining about with the impulse response was main listening position.
Yeah.
Like when you're there, it's like getting hit with a, it's like, I mean, I'm not kidding you. It's like someone cups their hands and just hits your ears over and over again when there's big bass hits. That's not pleasant. I mean,
some may say that that's enjoyable.
I would confess anything if it would stop. So I'm back to my normal setup.
Well, good. We're back to where you started that whole journey, and we're right back to where you were.
So
with 2 rows, second row, but yes.
What happened with all the, I think it was MB quartz you were putting in your headrest?
They're still there. They're nice. So the combination of the tactile with the near field is just another step up. Like I got those 8-inch dialed in really nice in the seat backs, but they still can't do what a near field can do. So it's different. The 8-inch are really good at subtle things like guitar strings or piano chords or something where the bass isn't just hitting you real hard. Like they give you that nice little tingly energy. The near field has trouble with that at real low volumes, and the 8-inch seat back do that. But the near field have that, like when the driver really gets kicking, like you can feel that through your body, which you're familiar with, Rusty. You know how that goes, and Ryan as well. That can't be reproduced by 8-inch driver. So like it's like that combination thing we've talked about in the past. It's all the things worked about together, complementary in a good way.
Well, something else happened with your room. You had people over, and you came to a consensus about your tops, if I remember correctly.
Yes. That's really disappointing. Should we go into that? You want to go into it?
Let's talk about Kevin's room first, and then we'll go into that.
Okay.
So, Kevin, you're showcasing your room at Midwest AV Experience. Could have been a good decision, may have been a bad decision, depending on how everything goes, but we'll see. Not because of the room, just because of the stress that it puts on you as the homeowner and the theater connoisseur. But I want to thank you for doing that. And I think the community will be better for it because I think you have an amazing room. But why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey, where you started from, things along the way, and then what brought you to where you are now, and why you're a masochist and decided to put it on with MWAVE and share it.
I see my journey probably started way back when I was in college the first time.
I can relate to that.
I think I got a DVD player shortly after they came to market and had like a little 13-inch TV in my room. But then, like over the summer, I stayed with my parents, and I got shortly after I quit college, I got a HD TV, and then went to Micro Center and got like a little $30 PC surround system with little speakers that are like that big, and had that going and thought I was just having the best time ever with cheap little sound system.
I think we all feel that way when we go down that pathway.
And then eventually, upgraded to little $20 bookshelf speakers, and then towers. And then at one point I had like in walls all the way around when I completely redesigned the living room. And then I was just like, next time I'm going to step up to something. I'm going to get like a projection system. And I met my ex-wife, and she had like a completely empty basement that was, I could do whatever I wanted to with. So I figured I'd probably just, get a projector and a screen, use kind of what I already had as far as speakers and subwoofers, and be done with it. But started going down the rabbit hole, started talking to more people on AVS about projection systems and everything. And I met Jonathan.
See, Jonathan, we're always like 2 steps away from Jonathan in this whole thing. It's always, where is Jonathan Von England in this whole conundrum? How many lines do I have to draw before I get back to Jonathan? Is how the whole industry should say. Vendor diagram. What vendor are we at? How many steps back to Jonathan? It's how it always comes back to you. You're everybody's kryptonite and everybody's significant other's greatest adversary.
Yeah, but I think his was the first place I went to locally. And he had, these big, huge subwoofers that were blowing out tons of air and everything. And I was just like...
Was that the 4000s at that point?
They were Captivator Pros. And so before the 4000s were around, Captivator Pros was all the rage.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is nice, but I think this is way overkill. I would never need anything like this. And then probably 2-3 months later, I was still trying to decide what I was going to use for my theater. Jonathan's like, hey, would you be interested in buying these? I'm like, okay. So now I have all that stuff, JTR stuff that he had originally.
Dangling the carrot.
And I went from just, doing a basic projection and normal seating and whatever speakers I had to 40,000 plus into a room with, Nile with, what's his company? I can't remember. Acoustic Frontiers.
Oh, Nile did your room?
Yeah, my first one, not the current one, but and then I went all out on that, and then eventually moved again, and I couldn't not have that experience anymore now that once I'd had it. And so this time I kind of built on a lot of the same ideas that I had in my last theater. And I had a lot of the same equipment and everything, and the space was similar. it's a little bit longer now, and then I just kind of wanted to go more function over aesthetics. Because my last room, I would like with the lights on, I think I liked how it looked better, but my new one, I kind of did a whole blackout on the front, so it's all dark and puts the black hole, and it still looks pretty nice, I guess.
Your old one was blue and black themed, almost kind of more of a gray, right, than a black even.
Gray, yeah, kind of like Cowboys type. But I had a little bit of black in the front, but it wasn't like too into the room. And the carpet was gray, and I wanted to eliminate a lot of the reflections I was getting on the ceiling and the floor. So I put a lot of more black velvet around, and some of my pictures don't even have all of the black velvet that I put up in it. And then the carpet I got was pretty much the blackest I could find. I got it from, it doesn't show up in the pictures, but when I compare all the samples, it's way blacker than what I could find locally. I actually had it imported from England, paid way too much for it. But it creates a nice black hole up front and helps the image a lot, I think. And then I added a couple more extra speakers because I wanted to get a better, more even surround on both of my rows. And so yeah,
So what equipment was in the old room, and then what equipment's in the new room? Did any of that change?
There's not much difference, and it's just the JTRs up front and the subs, and then I have some clips for surrounds. I added a couple more of those so I have 6 surrounds instead of 4 counting back. And then my ceilings are some Niles in ceiling speakers. Most of the other equipment is the same as far. I added an extra amp for going for the 4 side surrounds. I got the crown I got from Jonathan with the subs. Power that, and see, I just recently added like a Vero 5 media player, just because I was using the Shield for Cody to manage all my movies and everything, but the Vero is supposed to be a little bit more stable with Cody. I was having too many times where the Shield would kind of freeze up, so I'm still setting up the Vero 5, but I haven't had any issues as far as it crashing or anything yet. So
That's good.
that's good.
So if you could change anything or have done anything differently over your journey, is there anything that you would?
I probably would have bought a house a couple years before the prices went too crazy. I would have liked to have gotten higher ceilings, a wider room if I could. Let's see.
Any equipment changes?
Yeah, I mean, I would like at some point maybe to get some more JTRs for my surrounds and stuff to kind of match more of that. That's an upgrade thing.
Does he still make the 228?
No, but he'll custom order, I think, pretty much anything you ask him to. So he's got different Noesis now. It seems like every 4 or 5 years he'll kind of change his lineup. Those 228s are the first gen.
Got to keep the addicts on their toes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could go for some slanted 8s or something similar. And
I don't think he makes the slant 8s. It's now slant 10s, isn't it?
Slant 10s.
Yeah. He's realized how hungry all of his addicts are and got to feed them.
12s are next.
God. I mean, I can't say that mine are 12, so I laugh and I'm like, I'm that guy. Like tweaking out, where's the Coke? And anyway.
Yeah, I stay on the lookout a little bit for if somebody's going to sell some slanted 8s somewhere. But yeah,
Grant has the slant 8s, if I remember right. Yeah. Solid speaker. So what pushed you towards, like, I understand where you got the JTR stuff. What pushed you towards the clip stuff? Where did that come from?
I think originally before Jonathan offered me that, I was kind of considering like one of their in-wall lines for. I had talked to Steven on the Kansas City, and he was
Stephen Do.
yeah, and he's all into clips and everything. And I actually went out to his house and listened to some, and it seemed like it was a more affordable option, which it would have been way cheaper than what I got the stuff from Jonathan from. But
A lot of people do upgrade from clips to JTR. If you kind of watch that JTR thread, that's like a pretty common path because they kind of have a similar sound, like that horn style sound.
Mhm.
Michael always talks about that as well. He kind of thinks that's a natural progression.
and I think at one point I was thinking I was going to spend more on the design and the construction of the room, but I was able to kind of find a way to spend less in that area, so I was able to put more into equipment. So that'll let me make a jump up in quality, and then as far as the surrounds, I would have liked to have gotten more JTRs at the time, but it was just a budgetary thing to kind of stay at the clips, and I found those for pretty cheap for what they are. So,
And guys, we are going to answer your questions later in the stream. So if you have any, drop them in chat. I'll star them as we go through, just as a reminder. Okay, well, that's cool. I think it's always
I was going to
interesting
say,
to hear
you said you
the
didn't
journey.
put much into the form, but I think your room looks great. It's got some style to it and looks nice.
It may be because he didn't have Niall do the second room.
Maybe. I like your Back to the Future. Is that a pillow or is that a? I can't tell for sure.
yeah, it's a little plush pillow. The
Hoverboard.
Hoverboard, yeah.
That's cool. And I may have missed it, but it looks like in the photos that you have a masking screen.
Yeah, I got manual panels. It's not. Yeah, if I ever upgrade my screen to like something a little bit bigger, then I will try to get like something with like 4-way masking and stuff.
So are those just like magnetic panels you pick up and down?
Those
two
are
aspects.
Seymour's magnetic masking panels.
Yeah.
Okay.
That they do. They've got little clips that you slide into the frame, and then they've got magnets on the sides that hold them in place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are solid.
What's your favorite part of your room?
Favorite part is I don't know. I kind of like an all around. I like
a little bit of everything.
I like heavy bass at times. I like the atmospherics of a good mix that is taking advantage of the entire space, and I like just the black hole up front. I like how it's dark and it makes the image better, and I don't have a lot of reflections I have to deal with, and I just love watching movies. It's just that was my original passion that got me into it. I've always had a real strong passion for movies, and I saw Independence Day like 18 times at the theater because I worked at the theater.
That's committed.
That was like me with the original Mortal Kombat. Your movie was a much better theatrical choice than Mortal Kombat, but I was in elementary school.
I don't think I've ever been to see the same movie twice in a theater.
Really?
Maybe once. Maybe.
I think it's more popular when you're younger. I don't think we do it as much when we're older. Jonathan's sitting there smiling like I saw the last movie.
I'm kind of embarrassed. The only
times.
movie I saw a movie 3 times in the theater, and it's kind of embarrassing which one it was. It was Anaconda. Do you remember that one?
Yes.
Oh yeah. That was a fun movie.
Oh man, that is my grandfather's favorite movie, and I make fun of him every time.
Is it really?
But when it came out, I thought it was super cool.
It was
watching
fun.
it now, and it's like, oh my god, what was I watching?
I had different groups of friends that wanted to see it, so
I thoroughly enjoyed that movie. I'm not going to make fun of you. That's awesome.
It's not a cinematic masterpiece, but it's fun. It's entertaining.
So
have Ryan and Jonathan, have y'all both been to Kevin's room?
Yes, I was just there last week. It's really going to be a treat for the guys who are coming in for his tour. It sounds great. It looks great. It's a nice setup.
I have not, even though Kevin is very close. I was supposed to go over the winter, and then something came up, and I wasn't able to go. But I do need to
It was
make it over.
snowy that night, I think.
Yes, it was a little cold, and my electric truck, I didn't want to do it. But I do have a question, not just for Kevin, but for everybody here. If you could rebuild your room, right? What do you think is the most crucial, best bit of advice that you can impart on somebody that is just starting their own journey that you wish you would have done when you were doing yours?
And the thing I wish I could do different is make the room bigger, but that's not really an option for most people. But if I was just a little, especially wider, man, that would be great. And then the other thing is, I wish the equipment rack was somewhere that was a lot easier to get to, because I'm always changing something and it's a pain.
Really?
Mine's it's in a equipment closet, like 2 foot by 2 foot. And so I have to, the only way I can get to the back of it is to put the rails out and slide the whole rack out on rails. And it's a nuisance.
What are you changing all the time for?
I don't know. There's, either buying something or, well, just the other day I got my Mad VR remote version 2, and I have to install the dongle, and that's a process now just to plug that in on the back.
The fact that you're saying that it's a process to plug in a USB dongle is a little concerning.
I have to go get rails out, bolt them up, take the screen down. It's
oh my gosh,
it's a mess. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. No wonder.
But that was the space available.
Okay.
I wish I had like a whole equipment room.
Okay. Jonathan?
I think it probably, I explored with so much stuff along the way. It's something I think I figured out along the way, is that if you can get your bass right, it can cover a lot of other inefficiencies, or perhaps like the bass experience makes the home theater experience, in my opinion. If you can get that really well dialed in, then you can have even mediocre speakers and really impress someone. I think we've talked about that a little bit before. You can have great speakers and mediocre bass, and the experience is kind of like meh for home theater. But if you have great bass, then you can you can have a lot of different types of speakers and still have a very impressive experience. So I would think your bass right.
The bass is what people remember anyway. Like, you don't walk out of a theater and think, man, that movie had really good treble. I mean, we don't do that. It's, man, that movie had amazing bass. Even if you're not into home theater or music, that's what you talk about, is the rhythm of everything. Yeah. So I think it gets overlooked, and people don't realize that it's a large percentage of our theatrical and musical experience is the lower frequencies.
And then I would also say, besides the bass, so Nearfield is part of that. I mean, I think Nearfield is just so important. But tactile transducers, a lot of people seem to overlook them or have them implemented wrong. And I think it's like something that is not given enough credit in our world, because people stick them in and then they're not perfectly time aligned, or people are perhaps not the right HPF or LPF or different PEQ. And it's kind of like, it's distracting with music, and it's just not great. But if you dial them in great, they're fantastic. So that's another piece. Like, along with the bass, if you get the tactile feel right, like I'm listening to music down here for hours on end since I've had these seat back things, and I'm just enjoying it. It's like another experience, because now guitar chord and stuff, I feel it in the chair, and I love that. I really think that really makes the experience elevated.
Now, I do want to kind of piggyback on what Jonathan said, not for my own point, but I think it's important for people to realize, and that is, I think the important thing with Nearfield and Tactile is people have a tendency to overindulge. They push things too far, and it becomes noticeable, I guess is how I'll describe it. It should just meld together. It should be very difficult to differentiate a Nearfield and a Tactile experience from the actual far field or standard field experience.
Oh yeah, I agree.
And
you go over the top and it really distracts.
Yes.
It needs to be very subtle. It needs to be present. It needs to be there, but not
less is more.
Hopping you around on the couch.
Because what you're really focusing on, and what we've evolutionary come to obtain from our surroundings with time alignment and phasing and stuff with our ears is the far field. What we're using for the tactile transducers in the near field, it's all about just reinforcing and increasing the dynamicness of that already really solid far field experience. If you don't have a good far field experience, I don't really know that you're going to gain what Jonathan is talking about from tactile and near field. Now, you can, like in certain settings, potentially use it as a compromise because maybe you're in an apartment or something and you want bass, but you don't want to piss off your neighbors. But then I don't think you're getting to the level that Jonathan is talking about, which is just using the tactile and the near fields to reinforce an already really well done far field.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's just part of being a man, is we just want to take everything too far. And the key is that subtlety of
being a child.
Yeah,
Kevin,
you
screen name.
So my rule of thumb is like you get it to where you think it's where you want it, where you think you want it, and then like turn it down 3. And then that's where it's probably appropriate. And you go, well, yeah, but I can't. I don't feel it. I don't hear it. It's not the same anymore. It's like, then it's just right. Like that's when it's subtle enough that like you really can feel it. It's just not gratuitous.
Kevin, anything to say about the bass part?
No, I know I'm probably not quite as extreme as some. I know as Jonathan, definitely not Carp.
Carp's on a different planet.
But I mean, yeah, it can definitely make or break your room. I think if it's lacking too much, then it can be nice, but it's not gonna. You're not gonna get the wow factor.
Yeah,
at least a pretty solid bass that you can rely on. And it can take the room from being just okay to being excellent. I think it can just you can't replace just the feeling of your seat just shaking and the room just being full of pressure, and just it just can kind of take a scene from being kind of lackadaisical to just drives home the impact.
No, I do think it's important to say that we're not trying to tell people that they need plus 20 in the LFE track. That's not what we're saying. We're saying to have properly implemented low frequency. Not that you need to be schmammering yourself, like what Jonathan was saying, like having pressure waves cupping your ears as they come in and out. But I think people really underestimate the time that you should spend in dialing in your low frequency response and the impulse. And it's overlooked a lot of times. Everybody wants to focus on the speakers, and they have a tendency to forget about the low frequency and be like, it'll take care of itself. And I also think that that's a big reason why people have a tendency to inflate their SPL in the low frequency, is because they don't have it dialed into the point that they want, and they're chasing that tactile feedback. And the only way they can get that, or kind of try and get it, is by increasing the SPL. But with Jonathan's room, which he's alluded to when he was using the stacks in the corners, if it's properly done, you don't need as much as you think you do. It just needs to be properly dialed in.
That was some feedback I got from a few of my get-togethers where people had said they thought, 18-inch subs like this is going to be obnoxious. It's going to sound like a mid-90s Honda Civic that's got a bad stereo in it, just license plate rattling, and of course they didn't tell me this ahead of time, but they told me after. They're like, I was actually surprised, like your bass didn't seem, it wasn't obnoxious, it was just very well balanced and well integrated. And they said, I thought it was going to be just this obnoxious boominess. And I said, well, I appreciate that. So it's like there's enough there to feel like, I mean, it's hot, but it's not obnoxious.
For me, what I would try and impart on people is try and plan, or get to planning as early in the process as possible. Do not try and fit the room around your equipment, try and fit the equipment around the room, right? So make sure that you're doing the engineering of the room first, and then picking equipment that fits the mold of what you're trying to accomplish in the room instead of the other way around. We kind of alluded to this last week, but I think that's overlooked by a lot of people. And I would encourage, and I'm lucky enough that I've been able to go back and do it again, tearing my room down to studs, moving walls and all that with how the Mad VR Experience Center is playing out. But if I kept the other room, I really regretted not doing more planning around the room as it was being built, like risset clips, insulation, room within a room. I mean, things that I wish I would have done that I went back and did because I was redoing the entire theater. But all of that stuff, I think, makes a bigger difference than people think. Like, my wife previously could hear me talking in the theater when we were down here and she was in the kitchen. She can't hear crap now. Like, I could be yelling and she can't hear anything because there's so much mass and there's so much insulation in that room stopping things from getting up, and the ceiling is decoupled from the joist that she can't hear anything. And it's obviously she'll be able to hear the subs, but I think it's going to make quite a big difference when the theater is done. And it'll make a difference for my anxiety levels when it's done too.
I'm interested to hear your system now, because I've had the pleasure of hearing it first year and then the second year and comparing it. And I think the first year you had just 2 Captivator 4000s, right?
Yeah.
And then you had 5 the second year.
Yes.
But the first year, it was, no offense or anything, but it was so hot that it was painful. Like,
yeah,
it was.
And that's exactly what I was talking about earlier with me trying to compensate for boomy bass, get the tactile feedback back. That's what I think was happening. I've learned a lot along this journey.
There was a lot of tactile and like it was visceral, but after 5 minutes of what's that scene, the opening scene for Unbroken, and I was like, oh my goodness, my head just hurts. Whereas the second year, you had 5 Captivators, and yet it was way more balanced and blended. I mean, it still was. It was a fun experience, but it was a more like cohesive experience.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't imagine what it's going to be like with 13 subwoofers.
It's 11.
11. I apologize.
11. Get it right. God, rusty.
Fake news, man. Sorry.
Yeah. So the funny thing about the whole 11 subwoofers is everybody that I tell that the Experience Center is going to have a 50 and the 32s and the 21s is, man, you're going to have so much bass. It's going to be so loud. Your neighbors are going to hate you. I'm like, that's not what this is about. And that's where we come back to what you guys were talking about. The low frequency is we're not trying to increase volume, though we can. It's trying to smooth everything out, right? And trying to lessen the strain on systems. And that's why you go to these subwoofers like Kevin's Captivator Pros that have tremendous capability. They're not straining in any way, shape, or form. It's all about just delivering without trying. And then you don't run into distortion. And that's, I think a lot of people are like, oh, I can get to reference. And you're getting to reference, speaker or sub, a lot of times at the bleeding, raggedy edge of whatever hardware you're trying to do. And it's just a distorted mess. So that's my takeaway, at least with that whole thing. Trying to think if I have any other questions for Kevin's room. Kevin, what got you why? We're coming back. Why? What made you want to build a home theater? Like, what started that journey? You kind of gave us the equipment purchases, the stepping stones, but what made you like, man, I'm going to call Niall. We're going to get this done right with your previous room. And then I'm sure you took what you learned from that room and put it into this one, which is why you felt like you didn't need to go back to him. What made you decide to take that leap? Because that's a big leap. I mean, that's going from potentially a media space where you're enjoying movies to a dedicated space from a dedicated acoustician. That's a big change.
I'd say probably the biggest thing was just opportunity. I had a space that I had free reign basically to do what I wanted with, and I just wanted, I went around to a whole bunch of different places around town and did their demo rooms and everything. And I think the more I did that, the more I wanted something more high end and not just a nice space, but I wanted like an actual dedicated full on space. And I went to, I think at one point I was actually like considering doing like having them off to the side of the theater. I was going to have it actually going a completely different direction in the basement. And then I was going to have like a bar off to the side with some TVs and stuff. And I got convinced to change that up and kind of do a whole more dedicated space, because really my main thing was, movies and occasional games and stuff. So I wanted to focus on doing that part right and not worrying about other things. And then I had a budget I could actually work with and actually do something significant with. So I ran with it. And I wanted to get that movie theater experience without having to go to the movie theater. And I was able to do that. And
do you still enjoy the movie theaters, like the commercial cinema?
Yeah, I would say 95% of the time I only go to like the Dolby Cinema. I have A-list, so that makes it pretty easy. The rest of the time I'll either probably just wait for it to come on some kind of service, or just buy the 4K. But yeah, I think Dolby is really the only thing that really draws me to an actual theater as opposed to staying home. But I would still probably prefer it at home if it was like something that I could have available to watch at home right away and not have to go to the theater.
What was the last movie you saw in theater?
Might have been Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, but no, it was Furiosa.
Was that good?
Recent.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. I actually liked it more than Mad Max. I thought it had
really
more of the action wasn't as much, but I thought it had more of a story to it. So,
well, Mad Max had like no story. Let's be real here.
I mean, it's not a high bar, but but I appreciate that there was actually some kind of story to it besides just bare bones.
Jonathan, what was your last one?
Maybe one of the John Wicks. No, we went and saw Dune 2, so that would be the most recent. Rusty? I don't go to the theater but like once or twice a year usually.
Yeah, mine was
biggest titles.
Mine was Avatar 2, and that was only because I wanted to take my kids to see a 3D movie. And so we went to the Dolby Super something. I can't remember what it was. But
was the 3D experience good?
3D was good, but I wasn't crazy about the movie. I thought it was good, but not like it was way too long.
Yeah.
And then I forgot. The last time I actually went to a theater was last year at MWAVE, because
the night one?
The night movie? Thing. It was Mission Impossible. What are we? 7, something like 7, 8, 9, 10.
Protocol? No. Yeah, no.
Whatever
it was.
Impossible we're on. Dead
Reckoning?
Dead Reckoning.
I think so. It started with a submarine, I think, right?
I don't know. I was barely awake because we didn't finish till 1 o'clock.
The
movie was pretty good. It was good, but I'm more of an early riser. So
yeah, last movie I went to was John Wick 4, and it was one of those midnight releases. And you're always gung ho, like I'm going to do it, and then when the day comes, you're like, I really don't want to go. I want to be sleeping. So that was my last one. Every time I go, I always find things wrong. And I hyper focus on those things, and it just distracts from my experience. I can't let it go. I want them to be my fault, but instead I'm reliant on somebody else's implementation for my theatrical experience, and I'm not overtly excited about that.
And that was the thing. Even like Mission Impossible, the screen was so sparkly, like it was just rainbow sparkly, and the volume was so loud. Like I like loud, but this was uncomfortably loud, and so that kind of ruins the experience.
Do you think? Go ahead, Kevin.
That I always know, the one thing that really bugs me is like they have lights on the side of the room, and it's always kind of hitting the lower corners of the screen and kind of just killing the contrast in that area. Even in the Dolby, and they're
blue lights, which make no sense. Why not use red lights if you're going to have stage lights? Because that doesn't show up as much. I don't understand that either.
I mean, just let people die. Don't put exit signs up. Just let them die.
I mean,
if you can't find the exit sign, well,
they can wait till the end of the movie to get up. I mean, once they're in their seats.
Why does my seat smell like urine? That's the next problem when you don't have exit signs.
Things I didn't need to think about on tonight's stream.
I see what you did there. Little puns abound.
So I guess we can jump into some questions. We don't really have any, so maybe tonight's going to be a super short stream. We have 2 questions.
I have another question for Kevin before we jump into the customer questions.
Yeah.
Watcher questions. Kevin, how do you use your theater most often? Are you
good question.
Watch any TV? Do you watch movies only? Do you do music? What's your use case?
It's mostly movies. I'm trying to catch my wife up on most of my collection, so I'm trying to knock all that stuff out.
Are you mainly physical media?
Well, I have it all, ripped to hard drives and everything, so I stream it from the hard drive. So, I mean, TV, I have a whole bunch of stuff on Netflix and other stuff that is in my queue to watch at some point, and most of that I probably intend to watch down there. And then some gaming, not that I have nearly enough time for that anymore these days. So I still have games from 5-6 years ago that I haven't touched. So predominantly movies.
Good to go to questions.
Well, I think we were gonna come back and Jonathan was gonna say something about his MB Cord experiment, I think, or there was something, and then
tops.
Ryan, that's what it was, and then Ryan, you were gonna give an update about your floating theater.
Okay, let's start with Jonathan and his top adventure.
Yeah, so I'm real close to going back to 13 speakers instead of 15. And the reason is I've told you guys on and off on several streams since last year when I put the 15 speakers up that I wasn't necessarily in love with what it did to the soundstage with pressed audio. Pressed audio being when the Dolby Atmos objects aren't really free objects, they're just pressed. And the soundtrack is basically like a 7.x.2 soundtrack. So you get sound out of the middle 2 speakers if you have more than 2 speakers with a off-the-shelf consumer AVR like Dan Marantz, Yamaha, that kind of stuff. So what happens is if you got a press soundtrack, a lot of Disney stuff there's spatial audio that way. It ends up just being, and I'm going to have trouble doing it, but it's these 2 speakers, right? Because you got 6. So it's just the middle ones that play. Well, look where the middle ones are in relation to my main seats. So here's my main seats right here. The middle speakers are behind my main seats, which means when you hit that pressed audio, your soundstage, instead of being directly overhead, has moved backwards. Now, here's the reason why that's not a problem with 4 ceiling speakers assigned is because the consumer AVRs, if it's got a pressed audio track and you have 4 speakers, it blends them between the 2 speakers. So if it's blending them between the 2 speakers, my seats, I put equidistance between the front 2 pairs here. So if it's blending between those 2, it's directly overhead with pressed audio. And with pressed audio with 6 speakers, it moves behind me. So for a long time, I've said it's not as good with 6 speakers in my first primary row. What I had kind of expected was that over the course of the entire theater, it would be better. But in the last week, I had a buddy over, and I've done some testing on this in the past, and I wasn't in love with 6 speakers even in the rear row. what I found out is, and it's probably just my room layout, like if you had your druthers and you could put the center row directly or a little bit forward of your front row, yeah, I think you could get away with 6 speakers. I think the problem is, and I don't have lights on here to show you, but you know that they've got that HVAC drop down in here, right?
Mhm.
So I'm limited on placement. I cannot put those speakers on my HVAC drop down. There's HVAC register in there. So if I have 6 speakers, the next problem is, in order to maintain proper spacing and so forth, kind of keep them equidistant, I either have to push my back row really far back against the wall, and that doesn't work well, or I want to try to move it forward to get it more in the center of the sound field, right? So that it can kind of, the idea would be I would like to have it more forward so it can take advantage of the overheads that are in the front side of the room. The problem is with my limited ceiling height, I have 7.5 foot ceiling height, those speakers are really darn close to the top. When you're sitting in those chairs, they're just right overhead. They're like a couple feet over your head, probably, maybe 3 feet. And when they're that close, man, if an object whizzes through there, with 6 ceiling speakers, a lot of times they're just silent. So you kind of get acclimated to not a whole lot going on up there. But an object comes through and it's full force and that speaker's real close to your head. It's like startling. You're sitting in the back of the seat. You're like, that's too much. So what Tim came over and we spent hours doing testing back and forth. And we both ended up, we were just in the rear row. I was in the leftmost seat and he was in the rightmost seat. And we just sat there and listened to clips back and forth. We did the Marantz AV10 lets you switch between 9.4.6 or 9.1.4 and 9.1.6 with a couple button presses. So I had the amplifiers configured differently and I could test both back and forth. What we found out was we both in the back row liked 4 ceiling speakers more than 6 because that and it's probably a layout thing, but because that speaker's not so close to our heads and it blends better between the rear speaker and what would be top rear in that configuration. Let's do it this way so I can aim at it. So in the .4 configuration, this is top rear, and these speakers don't exist. They're just silent, right? They're unhooked in the 4 speaker configuration. So it blends nicely with 4 speaker config between the top rear and the back surrounds. So if there's an overhead thing, like with 4 speaker setup configured in the amplifier, it sounds like it's overhead anyway. Like you can't tell there's not a speaker overhead, and you don't have that glaring, real close speaker hitting you in the face. Like it's just not that loud. So it's advantage in the front row because my sound stage is moved forward and it sounds more equally overhead, and it's an advantage in the rear row because you're not getting blasted by that top speaker. If I had 12-foot ceilings or 14-foot ceilings, there might be advantages to having 6 speakers, but at the end of the day, I think I'm going back to 13 speakers.
Well, and because you can't center the centers over your front row.
Correct.
Yeah, it's because I do want to make sure that people understand that this isn't a problem necessarily with all content. It's just a lot of content has
press content is a problem with.
Yeah.
So Jonathan, are you using an up mixer when you're doing these tests on the press content?
So I always will do an up mixer. Like there's very few times that I won't. So this is Dolby Atmos, just straight Dolby Atmos content. We did some DTSX. We did up mixer stuff with Dolby Surround primarily. And there were a few instances, like when we're back and forth, we played hours worth of clips back and forth. There were a few instances, 3 on my count, that I thought I liked better with 6 speakers. And one of them was Mad Max Fury Road. The intro when the little girl's talking, she's whispering, it's like, she's whispering at the very intro before the car goes overhead and they have the chase in the desert and all that stuff. In that particular scene, when she whispers with 4 speakers, it's coming out of right here. And when she's whispering with 6 speakers, it's coming out of right here, or, the back row. You can tell a little bit better that it's overhead in the back row, and with 4 speaker configuration, it sounds like it's more here. So, but if you didn't know, if you weren't doing back and forth, it still sounds like it's overhead. It's just forward instead of backwards.
Did you try something like Gravity?
Oh yeah, we did do Gravity.
What was your takeaway there?
That's a perfect example of that kind of object sound where those speakers are not real loud, but then when it comes coming through, it's
startling.
So I'm going to explain this a little bit differently too. As that object comes through moving through that speaker, it's like bam, it's right there. That his voice when he's coming through the comms or whatever is so loud when it's right overhead. And so I've always tried, since I've done this in the last year, I've always tried to lower those ceiling channels. If I drop them 2.5, 3 dB, that's fine. That helps. It's still loud. The kicker is when you're dropping those rear channels, now you're affecting your front row because you have that, you're dropping at 3 dB, but that's not appropriate for the front row. It's helpful for the rear row, but it's worse for the front row. If I just have 4 speakers, I don't have to do that kind of nonsense. I can just have them all set to, my 75 dB test tones and let it roll. And I don't have this little compromise that I'm making for both rows. So at the end of the day, yeah, in my room with my arrangement, 13 speakers is better. So I don't know. Tim's like, yeah, but it looks cooler with 15. He's like, and Sheldon was like, maybe you could just leave them up there, and just have them for show. But the thing is, like, that's a couple $1,000s of speakers up there. They're $1,000 a piece. If I'm not using them, I'm not gonna keep them up there. I'm gonna try to take them down at some point. So I don't know. I'm weighing that out, but that's been my findings. I'm increasingly cementing it in my mind with my space. Now, like you said, if you had 12-foot ceilings, 14-foot ceilings, and if you could move the whole soundstage forward so that the center row was more directly overhead or even a little bit forward overhead, that'd be where that's at.
Or if you just had one row, I don't know that the ceiling height would have mattered as much. But the second row,
well, with one row, you just need 4. I don't even think you need 6 with one row, because 4 helps you with the press content. The press content is still going to be less impressive with 2 speakers, even if they're directly overhead, than 4 speakers and imaged. I think so.
We'll have to play with it in my space.
Sure, that'd be great.
Yeah.
How are you distinguishing if it's pressed or if it's object based?
So I say pressed probably more liberally than I should. There's content, and we were talking about this in my room thread on ABS forum. There's content that I put in a pressed category that Desert Dome ran some software tools on. And he's like, that's not pressed. There's content coming out of there, but the levels were like 40 dB difference. So like the pressed content that I'm calling, like the front heights or the front tops were like negative 60 dB. They were so low, and the top middle was like 17.
The issue there is that most people don't have a noise floor that content's even going to be relevant.
Exactly. You can't hear it unless you put your head next to the speaker.
Yeah.
And so if you have it and there is content that's truly pressed, like those the anything except for the top middle is completely silent. There's nothing happening in there. But whether there's nothing happening or whether you can't hear something happening is kind of a moot point, really, when you're sitting there, right? So pressed content applies to more than that, because a lot of the content seems to be mixed, where the center middle is much louder than the other two, unless an object's coming through, like a spaceship's coming overhead or something, that type of thing. That might be more equal between the sounds.
So can you tell? Are you just going based off of like the release information on the disc, or are you just basing it off?
No, they don't advertise it. They don't advertise it, and it's not on the Marantz. It's just listening. So
okay, so just purely listening is,
and it's not hard to tell. Like, this isn't something that's like subtle, like, oh, you might not notice. You notice it. Like if I'm listening to Dolby Atmos music, spatial audio on Apple Music, and all of a sudden I can hear like only the channels that are behind me and above me are the ones that are active. That's like what you hear with the music. It's the sound stage is not right. And so like it's just glaringly obvious when you run across something like that. And we've been testing with that for months with some of my buddies on and off as we've come in here, like other times, and they're like, yeah, that's clear. And I've got a little playlist that I kind of created on Apple Music to kind of showcase that. I was going to kind of show to MWAVE to, just as a teaching thing. I don't know how relevant it is to everybody else, because it's related to my room and my short ceiling heights and my placement and stuff. But it is interesting to know, because it's not something that's broadcast clearly on the forums. I mean, I read the forums constantly, and I never heard of that before, or at least never pieced it together. I didn't expect 15 speakers to be a downgrade in any way, really. Like I found out it's a big compromise in my room, really, and a negative compromise at that. So disappointing to spend all the time and money. I figure that probably cost me $6,000 or $7,000 when you consider I got an AV10, I got 2 more CVTs, the wiring, the time, new ceiling tiles, the mounts, everything. And then to find out over the course of the last year that's detrimental is kind of a kick.
What's going to end up happening is you're going to take all of your current seats out. You're going to put your previous chairs back in. You're going to get rid of all of the other equipment. Your room's just going to revert back to exactly how it was last year. That's the direction. That's the direction we're going. But sometimes that happens. I mean, if you don't try it, you don't know. So at least you know, and you can check that off your list, and you're done.
Yeah,
that's good. Updates on the Experience Center. The room is sitting off of Houston right now, so it is in port. It has cleared customs. It has just not come off the boat. It may be off the boat now. They said it could be in the CFS by tomorrow or 1 or 2 days after that, and then it will be put on a truck Once it gets to CFS, I have to schedule freight pickup, and then it's going to be put on a truck and come here. And then it'll take us probably 2 to 3 days to get everything installed. Doug is working his magic on the subwoofer still. He's doing bracing right now, so it's actually starting to look like a subwoofer. We both had a panic moment. He before me, because I came in later. I was like, Doug, are we going to be able to stand this up in here? And he looked at me and goes, I panicked about that earlier. And we have 3 inches. Because we're building it on its back. So we have to stand it up to get the bracing in. And he was like, I didn't know if we were going to be able to pick it up. Like, we have 3 inches to be able to pick it up. So,
well, how is he still working on that? How long is this taking?
Dude, it's a big one. It'll probably take 80 hours.
Wow.
Is our guess. Because it's enormous. I mean, the amount of bracing that is in this is unbelievable. I mean, I'll take some pictures tonight so that we can share. I'll share in the build thread because I've got a lot of updates and stuff that I need to do if I can ever find time to update that thread. But it's a lot more than was in there originally, and he's just taking his time, being very methodical, like he does with everything. But there's so much more in this sub because it's so much bigger that it just takes a lot more time. So I think he'll be done next week, I think, is when we'll be done. Because he works in the evenings.
Around the clock or every day, or just like a weekend thing?
No, it's like evenings. He'll come over 2 to 3 times a week and then work on it for a while and then go home, and just when he has time. So
unfortunately, it's not very close for him either. So he's got a lot of drive time there too.
Yeah. I'm gonna make him sign it in blood. He'll be forever attached to this thing. So I'm sure it'll be phenomenal. We ordered Duratex and everything to paint it, and he's doing pocket screws for everything. So it'll be awesome when it's done. I mean, the front piece by itself weighs like 200 pounds. Just the front facade of this dang sub weighs almost 200 pounds without the driver. So it'll weigh probably with the driver, probably close to 2,000 pounds is our best.
So how does this affect? Because your room is designed for the original.
No, it doesn't really affect anything.
Okay.
I have enough depth because the back area is like 6 feet deep. So it doesn't affect anything.
Okay. But it's not changing width. So you don't have to okay.
Correct. It actually helps a little bit because I can use the sub kind of as a projector stand.
Oh my gosh. I don't know about this, man.
We'll see. Well, I don't know where else. I'm not going to have, if it does cause a problem, we can put like a really thin platform over the top. But if I put it on some like isolators or something and then put a piece of wood on it, I don't think it'll be a problem. Because it's all double stacked Baltic birch glued together. I don't think it's going to do anything.
Somebody was talking about that in the Discord thing, I think, recently, or maybe it was on AVS forum. There are little isolators that have springs in them, effectively, that are meant to like keep a record player stable in an environment that's
My worry is if we do too much, like I don't have a lot of height because the sub is already going to be 71 inches tall. I've got 89 inches of total height.
Man, that Christie, how tall is that Christie? It's like 3 foot tall.
It's not that tall.
It's only 2.
No.
You won't even fit in there. He's got 71 to 89. You better make sure that math works.
Hold on. Now you're making me panic again.
I hope it doesn't suck.
I hope it doesn't suck. I hope the dang projector fits.
I love this.
Hey,
no, you love it. You just get to watch me suffer.
Every single podcast, we're like, oh no, we didn't think of this. That's what happened.
No, I did think of it. It's 15 inches tall, so it'll fit by like 3 inches.
What are those? What's those isolators called that you use on your chairs, Jonathan?
Hudson Hi-Fi.
Hudson Hi-Fi.
Yeah,
you need to put some of those under your projector.
That was the idea. Just put those on them and call them good. And the other benefit is I have like 4 feet of depth that I can put the projector wherever. So it's a great table. It's just I don't have really room for anything else. That's it. So
You know,
We'll see.
earlier when you were talking about all your soundproofing and all the things that have gone into it, I was like, I wonder how much more your house weighs now than it did before.
So it's 8,000 pounds of OSB.
Golly.
4 tons.
4 tons of OSB, and then it's a
A
ton of
one-ton
Baltic birch.
subwoofer.
Yeah, and then you've got the 232s that are 400 pounds a piece, and then you've got the 21s that I think are like 100 or 130. And there's 8 of those.
So I'm over 10,000 pounds now so far.
Oh,
If
we're
I'm
well
doing-
over. We're like at 12,000 pounds right now.
Yeah.
And then you've got 14 12-inch berylliums, which are like 50 pounds a piece. So that's 700 pounds. And then each of the black swans weighs like 150 pounds. So that's another 1,000. So we're like probably encroaching on 15,000 pounds of extra weight that I've added into this house.
Nice.
So 7 tons. I mean, it's a decent amount of mass in that room.
Just, you know, hey, now you know where to go when there's a tornado.
Well,
You
we
have
were
a-
joking that we would just build a door in the back of the 50 and just jump in the 50. It'd be our panic room. Just jump in the subwoofer.
Oh, that's funny.
Just nobody turned it on or we'll be turned into mincemeat. But we're going to pack it with R38, I think. Because Doug did the calculations like $1,000 for a polyfill just to fill that thing.
Golly.
So I've got tons of bats of R38 from doing the ceilings and stuff. So we'll just use that. Anything else? We started putting together the racks. So that's nice. That's a step in a positive direction. So I've got the Storm and the Trinov racked. I've got all of the amps racked. It came out to be 19 circuits for this room is what we ended up going for. So there's 15 20 amps. No, there's 14 20 amps, 1 30 amp, and 4 12 amp or 15 amp for this room. That's way overkill, but we did it that way because it's every amp is going to be on its own circuit. Just made we were already running a 100 amp sump panel, so we just ran the wire and everything will be on its own. And then the Christie needed its own. Then the 12s will run like the processors and the audio stuff and all that.
So did you say racks plural? You have multiple racks now?
There's 2 racks.
So how do you get to everything? Or is it like in that little closet area?
It's in an unfinished part of the basement that's back there. And then we have to run everything back over there, which is why we needed a sub panel, because the actual panels for the electrical for the house are like 50 feet away. So we ran a 100 amp sub panel over there and then terminated all of the circuits for the racks back into it.
So your racks aren't in the front left area anymore.
No.
Everything's moved to the back.
Yes. Not in the
Okay.
back. They're in a totally different part of the basement. They're not.
Are you
in-
going to be able to get to your existing panel in that front left?
Yes. I
Because
can
that's
go.
for the rest of the house.
I can go under the stairs and behind the screen.
Oh,
I can still get to it.
Well, remember, he has a secret passageway in here somewhere too.
So we can still get to that. I'm waiting on an AV Pro Edge HDMI switch to do all the switching because I want to be able to do like with Mad VR, without Mad VR, and I've got to be able to switch back and forth for that. And running multiple projectors, so that needed to be done. This week I'll start running speaker wire. It's like 3,000 feet of 12.4, I think, for the room.
12.4. Why'd you get four wires?
The subs need really 12.4, and
You're going to wire 2 wires together on each positive and negative?
Yeah, it's a
Okay,
4-pole.
so
All the speakers use speak on, so it's 4-pole speak on. So I'll just terminate them all into the speak on and be done.
Well, yeah, about that, I don't think speak on traditionally Nutrec stuff won't support more than 12 gauge wires, so you won't be able to get 2 12 gauge wires in one connector, at least not at the contact point. You might be able to find something like that. I don't know, but by default it won't.
We'll make it work. This is what was recommended by Ascendo, because of the wattage that was being sent for the subs and stuff. So we'll just.
I have heard somewhere along the way that they have like I don't even know what they call it, but like a thicker 2 connector. So if you're doing 4 wires converted to 2 wires, doubling them up, that'd be the equivalent of like a 9 gauge wire, I think. I don't think it's quite I don't think they double it down to 6. I think on the scale it goes to 9. I have to look that up. But you would want, if that's the case, and I think it is, you would want to look for neutrons that or Neutrex or Speakons that support 9 gauge wire.
Well, the speakers come with it. So
What? They come with the Speakons?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All the pro stuff from Ascendo comes with Speakon connections. So ideally, you want minimum length or compensation like Alcons do. MW, what are you talking about?
He's talking about the speaker wire should be as short as possible.
Oh,
for
yeah.
damping factor and stuff.
Yeah. I'm
Which
going to
I
try and
don't
make them as
know
short
how
as I can. But
Audible that is. It'd be fun to do some testing at that at some point.
yeah, they'll be minimal, as short as I can make them, but it's still going to be a decent length. I mean, not a short run. So 3,000 feet, because all of the subs are also passive. So it's 17 speakers and then 11 subs that have to be wired. It'll be
throw in another ton in wire.
Moving those spools sucked. I mean, they weigh like 75 pounds each for the dang 500-foot spool. They're not light. So those were not fun. My garage is full of crap, like just boxes. And every week I have to schedule a bulk pickup to come get crates and boxes. I'm sure my neighbors walk by and like, what is this guy doing?
Yeah, but that's not even the room yet. Like what? This is like the room is going to be what are you doing?
Well, you won't be able to see anything. So at least that's the idea. It's got to get here first. Hopefully it'll get here next week. This week. It's got to get here this week. Because if it doesn't get here this week, we're in trouble.
You need to go down there and pad someone's palm.
We're in trouble. Well, I'm thankful that Cameron from Insane AV, he's in Houston. So he's going to go to the port and get all that smoothed over for me. But if it doesn't come this week, because Jeffrey comes in 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks from today or yesterday. He'll be here in 2 weeks. So we got 2 weeks to get this thing together. It's got to be ready to go. 2 weeks. Can't believe it's only 2 weeks away. This has been going on for 7 months. It needs to be done. I'm over it. I don't want to be doing this anymore. Oh, there's so much. It's such a mess. There's so much crap everywhere.
Once it's all done, it's going to be epic.
Oh, once it's done, but it's like I want to do my work in there again. I want to be able to do it to be done. I'm tired of living in squalor.
Yeah. Well, living in a construction zone just sucks no matter what.
It's not fun. Not fun. It's not fun constantly cleaning out your garage for it to just go right back to how it was. And then we're doing an area of the unfinished basement for my son so we can, because he's getting older and we want him to have a place to hang out. And I'm kind of taking over the good part of the basement. So now that's going on. So I've got 20 sheets of drywall showing up at my house tomorrow. And it's just, I keep adding more. It keeps getting worse. Instead of getting better and things going away, it's just getting progressively worse. So hopefully this week I can get my basement back to being able to play pool. That would be nice. I bought a pool table, played it for 30 days, and then it went under a cover and haven't been able to play it since. So that'd be nice. That's the update on the room.
You just keep all the plywood and sheetrock on it now?
No. That's all in the garage. If anybody needs OSB, right, I got about 10 sheets of 3/4-inch OSB that we didn't use. So if anybody needs OSB, I got some that needs a home. Let me know. Probably best if you're in the Kansas City area because it doesn't ship well. Because it weighs like a ton, half a ton. It's $100. It's 100 pounds a sheet.
Can you just take it back? Did you buy it
it's
at
been
like
too
Home
long.
Depot or Lowe's or
It's
something?
been way too long. I've had it for like 7 months.
If it's in perfect shape, they might take it back.
How am I going to get it back?
How'd you get it there?
They delivered it.
Oh, you got a truck?
Yeah, but Yeah. What is the maximum cargo capacity of an F-150?
Probably half ton normally.
1,000 pounds.
Yeah.
That'd be about right for that OSB. 100. You just said 100 pounds of sheet. That's right. That's comfortable.
It's comfortable. It's comfortable. Mm-hmm. I really don't want to move it. It's one of those things like I'll give it to you for free if you come get it and take it away.
You post that on Facebook Marketplace, you'll have people in your
gone.
front yard in 15 minutes.
Oh, I'm sure. I just don't want to. I got to get stuff off of it. 'Cause right now it's the shelf for Baltic birch for Doug's cutting. So it was over 10 sheets of OSB, and then it was 20 sheets of Baltic birch sitting on top of it. So it was.
You might want to hang on to it till the end just in case any other surprises pop up. Yeah, you'll have a
Just
materials
build
on
another
it.
theater.
MWAVE bonfire. Listen to these guys.
No, you wouldn't want to burn the OSB with the glue and stuff in it.
We all get cancer. I got MWAVE cancer.
I'm going to get cancer anyway. I mean,
That's not a good promo. Say you're gonna get cancer and hold up your can of whatever.
I just mean that I think whatever we eat and drink is going to give us cancer eventually, probably. Anyway, nothing. Not to jump down that wagon. Anything?
Our turn.
No, yeah. Let's not go down there. Nobody's been asking questions.
There you go. They'll give you a Viking funeral on your OSB. Burn it up as a fire.
So what happened with the old sub cabinet? Did you give it back or sell it back, or
I still have it.
are you
What are
what
you
are
going
your
to do with
plans for it?
Sell it?
Raffle?
No, if when another 50 gets sold, somebody can have a good cabinet for a used price.
So
Talk
for right
about-
now, it's just garage.
It's in our warehouse. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
it got moved.
At least it's not taking up your garage.
My garage is full to the gills, and I took 6 pallets of crap out of it last week. I'm ready to be done. All right, 2 questions. This is unusual to have 2 questions. Drop Zone 7 asks, and I think he's talking about
The JTR 228 HT.
yes. How do they compare to the JBL horns?
So Kevin, JBL horns might be something like Sheldon has. If you've been over to his house, he has the 4722 with the upgraded horns.
Not actually been to Sheldon's yet.
You've never been to Sheldon's?
Nope.
Mm. If you want to feel like you're in an earthquake, like a real earthquake or an apocalyptic event, his is the place to go.
I kind of felt like that when I was watching Cloverfield Paradox or whatever that one's called.
Did you guys like that movie, Paradox?
I didn't see it. I watched the first 10, 15 minutes of it, and I thought, this is too scary for me. I'm quitting. So I didn't finish it.
I haven't seen it.
No?
Right.
The first one's still my favorite.
That's the one where they fused him into the wall in the first 10 or 15 minutes, right? Yeah, that's when I turned it off. I was like, this is too eerie for me.
I like that all the Cloverfield movies are slightly different, but they exist in the same universe. Like, what was the second one? I don't remember what the second
The one with John Goodman?
Cloverfield Lane.
I liked that one.
That was awesome. Because you were like, what is this movie? And then at the very end, I won't ruin it for people if they haven't seen it, but that was a great movie, I thought.
I liked that one.
That was good. So back to the JBL thing. What do you guys think?
I don't have a reference for a comparison. I haven't heard the JBLs, so I don't know.
Jonathan?
I don't think I've ever heard them side by side. I will tell you this, and Sheldon will probably be mad at me for saying this, but he doesn't agree, so that's fine. We all have our own opinions. Sheldon went from JTR with their horns to JBL with the upgraded horn, and I always still kind of like the JTR, but that's my own personal opinion. JTR uses the BMS compression driver, and in the Noesis line, in the full size ones, he uses the best compression driver BMS makes. Like the compression driver itself is over $1,000 just for the part that Jeff pays. You're gonna have trouble finding something that's that high of a quality driver and something that JBL sells in most of their horns. If you go if you go into the very top of the line type stuff, you might get into that type of range, and they make their horns in house. So there's no direct, there's no direct comparison there. But JTR's horn is very high quality. So, depends on what level JBL we're talking about. There's nothing wrong with like Sheldon's upgraded 4722. They're very clean, but I still personally kind of prefer the JTR's Noesis. His 212 HT he had before that, 215 HT he had after that type of thing. Sorry, Sheldon, but I know you like the 4722s better. That's fine.
I think horns are going to sound kind of like horns, regardless. I don't know that it would necessarily, if you're comparing price point to price point, I don't know that it would necessarily matter, in my opinion. Somebody's probably going to crucify me for saying that, but, I don't think it's going to matter too much.
I think in order to do a real comparison, you need a side by
JBL
side because it's so hard to compare without. And I've never done a side by side.
Yeah, I haven't either of those. At least of the horn variants, I don't know.
Yeah.
So, next question. There's been a couple more. I noticed the PSA MTM 212 speakers have a frequency response to 18 kilohertz. Is that an issue since others go up to 20 or even 24 kilohertz like the JTRs? That's a question.
Not really, because you don't hear that high anyway. Go do a sound test.
A lot of times is kind of go when you're looking at your frequency response anyway.
There are hearing tests online, and if you're 40 years old, like all of us on this thing here, you're not going to hear above probably 16,000 hertz. Really, I mean, maybe in that ballpark. Maybe you hear 17. But as you age, your hearing of the high frequencies diminishes, and there's nothing you can do about it. No matter how much you protect your hearing, that's just the way it works with human ears. So 18,000 hertz is, unless you're like 20 years old, that's probably above your hearing range. I wouldn't worry about it too much.
Good.
And it's not going to be like a brick wall, 18,000 hertz anyway. Like Ryan was saying, it's going to be like a roll off. And it's probably above the range you hear. So it just probably doesn't matter.
Yep. Drop Zone asks, how near is too near for Nearfield?
There isn't too near, is there?
We're going to find out with the 50. But I don't think there's too near.
I don't think
put it right behind you.
Yeah, if you could get that cone right up next to your back, it's just more impact. So you can always dial it down or turn it down. The closer, the better, man. That's what we've always said.
Yep, more controlled, easier to dial in.
Oh, look at this. This is super interesting to me. This comment just came in. So if you're still here, man, let's hear more from you on this. Like, this is something you independently figured out as well. Like, I feel like this should be something that's more on the forums. I think I'll have to make a thread on it to kind of get the discussion opened up on it. Because
I think the 4 is going to make it sound like it's more encompassing, wider, instead of just from 2 points right above you. You're going to get some forward and rear effect using 4 because of the dispersion of the speaker. So I'm
assuming that he's talking about having 6, but maybe not, because he said he opted to go back to 4. So I'm assuming he had 6 as well, like I did, and decided to go back to 4. But maybe clear that up, Erod.
Yeah, I think he's talking about 6, but we're talking about press content, would be my guess. I don't know.
Interesting.
Do not know. Erod, if you're here, let us know. Johnny E says, Ryan, I think I missed it, but question, what amps are you using for your Ascendo subwoofers? It is going to be the Ascendo amps. They're 20,000 watts apiece. One for each of the...
You said it with a straight face.
I did.
You didn't even smile.
No. One for the 50, one for each of the 32s, and then 2 are going to be split out and running all 8 of the 21s. So each 21 would get 5,000 watts. So 20,000 watt sub amps. And all of the amps are going to be connected to 240. So, yeah. Go ahead. You pulled up Jace Reynolds. Did you do that? Did I do that?
I was trying to start and accidentally clicked show.
Oh.
But we can go ahead and do it
Jace
now.
Reynolds. So would you use 2 RS2s as near field behind seats or put them in the back of the room to integrate and have 2 I have 2 RS2s up front. So if you were adding another 2, would you put them in near field or would you use them as far field in the rear?
I'd definitely do near field if you have the room or space for it. It's just a totally different feel that I don't think you can really achieve with far field.
Anybody else? So instead of having 1 in each corner, you do 2 up front and then near field? Those are expensive near field subs.
Yeah, I mean, the other little trick is, I played with the directional bass. We talked about that on a previous podcast too, where I put 2 of my 8 subs in every corner. I don't really have corners per se in the back, but where the corners would be because my room opens up. And it caused some issues in different seats more so than my normal arrangement. So if I was in the front row, it was fine because that's where it was dialed in for. But if I was on the back row, the phasing wasn't right. In my room, that was causing issues and it sounded funky. So the near field, my hypothesis is that the near field are relatively closer in distance to both seats, or at least close enough that it doesn't feel like there's phase issues. You don't hear phase issues. If they're there, you don't notice it. And I don't really see it on the mic either. But with the corner bass, I was getting odd phase issues that I didn't like in the rear row, especially. The bass was not smooth. So you might have to fight that if you have depending on your room size and all the modes and nulls that are come up because of your wavelengths, might be something that you have an issue with in the back. But you won't have it with near field because especially if you just have a single row, it'll be very smooth feeling and sounding.
So Erod got back to you and says, yes, you get more activity with the 4 speakers than 6. Several on the forum have come to that conclusion. Unless you have a massive room, it just sounds more expansive to me and others too.
See, this is real interesting, and I haven't seen a thread on that. Erod, send me a PM on ABS forum. I'm Archaea on there, ARCHAEA. Let's get to talking about it. I'd like to know more about your experiences. It's pretty interesting to me.
Well, I think he's talking about with the 6, 2 overheads, and most of the speakers aren't doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
They just got to stop pressing content. Stop it.
Mm-hmm.
Cheap bastards. We on our last question? We are. Juan Orphy. Sorry if I mispronounced your name, Juan. Any guide on dialing in transducers?
That's not a quick conversation, really.
Not.
I can take a stab at it if you want. But
maybe could you point him to maybe a forum post or a website or something? I think that's what he's asking.
I don't know.
Not really. I mean, this is trial and error type realm for me. There is a tactile feedback thread on ABS forum that's really, really long, but I don't know that there's so much guides in there. Just a lot of people experimenting and trying it and giving different recommendations. I will tell you this, Juan, that you need to have a mini DSP or something equivalent where you can apply an HPF and a high pass filter and a low pass filter as appropriate for your devices. And you need to be able to set timing. The timing is of the absolute utmost importance. And if you have something like a butt kicker, that has a metal slug flying around in there, you need to have that firing. In most people's experience that I've talked to that have really dialed in, it needs to fire before your subwoofers. So how do you set a negative delay on it? The way you do it is by increasing the distance on your AVR to your butt kickers. So an AVR works by, if you have more distance, it thinks it has to get the sound out sooner in order to time align. So in my case, on my subwoofer 3 and 4 output on the AV10, I increase it by 5 feet in the AV10 over whatever my distance is on my front sound bank. And that gives me enough room to play, and they fire before the subwoofer. The signal gets to the butt kicker before it gets to the physical subwoofers. And that allows you to then set to 100th of a millisecond with the timing in mini DSP. And this sounds more complicated than it is, but it's really, really, really critical to get that time alignment. Think about it like a bass drum hit or something. If there's just 60, 70 hertz and it's just hitting routinely, you need some music like that to dial it in. And you want that butt kicker to be firing at the same time that you're getting the physical sound to your ears so that it feels like one uniform sound.
It should be near impossible to distinguish between the butt kicker and the sub.
And if you have it just set at 0 foot, Marantz and Denon had a tactile transducer feature on their new AVRs, and unbelievably, they still haven't fixed it with a firmware update where they let you set the distance on it. And so it defaults to like, I don't know if it defaults the same as the subs or if it defaults to whatever, but you can't even set the distance with it. And without being able to set the distance, it is unusable. Like that feature is unusable. So I just set it as a regular subwoofer, and then I increase the distance. In my case, in my room, it's like increase it by 5 feet, and then you have room to play with it and perfectly time align it with a hundredths of a millisecond range up and down. You got to play some tracks. I have some, just think about something with some nice kick drums or some nice upper bass, some varied frequencies too, and you play with it, right? You get your timing exactly right, and then you start playing with the HBF and the low pass filter, and you dial that in. So my 8-inch seat backs, they play from 95 hertz, and they got a 6 dB Butterworth filter to roll off anything over 95 hertz, and they play down to about 42 hertz, and they roll off at 6 dB Butterworth on the bottom end, roll everything off but down low. And my butt kickers, they play up to 38 hertz, and there's a 6 dB roll off Butterworth as a low pass filter, and I do not have a high pass filter on the butt kickers. They play all the way down to like DC, if you will. I mean, they play really low without bottoming out. So implementing that and integrating that is just critical, and it's playtime. My settings won't apply to you in your chair or your mounting location. It's all very unique, and you can't, there's no prescription for it. So it's trial and error. It's many hours of testing, and to get that precisely set up, you have to have a passion for it. You have to have an interest in it. Otherwise, it's just going to always be like probably not worth your time to do. At least not once you experience one where it's set up properly, you'll be like, this isn't right. What I had is not right.
Once you get it set up correctly, you'll never want to not have Nearfields again.
So one thing that may be helpful to you, Mark Geomania on the forums wrote up a guide where he kind of took a lot of the forum information and consolidated it into a guide. A binder, yeah, a 67-page binder. And it's specifically for Croson motion actuators, but I think that the majority of the information could still apply to a butt kicker. You just have to, play with different. I wouldn't take all the specifics and directly put them in. It's like Jonathan said, there's a lot of playing with it, but it does a pretty good job of explaining where to how to go through that process. So I'm going to post that in the chat. It's a Google document. So hopefully that's helpful.
To summarize here, the important things with this is you need to have your butt kickers fire before your Nearfield, your other subs, because they take a moment because they have a physical piston. And you either do that by increasing the distance or having everything else delayed further in milliseconds than those subs are, than those tactile transducers are. And then the other important factor is, and Jonathan touched on this, but I don't think he emphasized it enough, is that you will need to dial these in down to the 100th of a millisecond. Like, it is that critical to get these to hit at the exact right time, because we are very, very, very adept at identifying when sounds hit us and then time aligning all of that. So if they do not hit at the right time, you will notice, and it will break your immersion, right? It may not seem like it's a big deal until, as Jonathan said, you get into a room that has done it correctly and everything just blends, right? It's all seamless. So it's very important to spend more time than you probably think you're going to need to in order to dial these in just right, because you want it to be to the point that somebody says, do you have butt kickers on? And not even be sure what's going on. Or not even ask the question because they didn't even realize that anything could have been possible. It should, the easiest way for me to describe this, and this may seem kind of funny, is to make it so your wife doesn't notice. If she can't notice and she just thinks it's blending with everything else, job well done. Because my wife will, if she notices it, she'll look at me like, what did you do? She doesn't notice. It all blends well together. But that's a good summary of everything.
I had somebody last, I don't remember, it's been months ago, but they said, I thought you said you had butt kickers and stuff in here, like tactile transducers. And I said, I do. And I said, let me turn them off. And I turned them off, and he's like, wow, what a difference. That's the kind of response you want, that they don't know that they're on until you take them away.
Yep. So I think this is the last question. We just got one that came in. What do you think of the WeM amp? I'm thinking of buying one, or I can go with a secondhand AVR. Which one is reasonable money-wise? Does anybody have any experience with the WIM amp?
I haven't even heard of that. WIIM.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't know anything about those.
What do you
Audio
use
Science
this
did a
for,
review.
Mosin?
ASR did a review, and it's well above human threshold for hearing on the signal-to-noise ratio. Puts out... What kind of power is it putting out? Signal-to-noise ratio 105. That's way over human hearing. Puts out 122 watts. At 4 ohm and 62 watts at 8 ohm.
Okay. I mean, I think
I
it's
say,
good
let me-
for a 2-channel streamer, because I think it's a streamer, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I think
Amir says it's good. He recommends it. So there you go.
Yeah, it's a streaming amplifier. So it's like the SVS has one, or Sonos, or
I was gonna say it reminds me of the Sonos amps.
Or Marantz now has their new the Marantz 1 or something like that. So they have something that uses Hios. But as MW said, I think a secondhand AVR is probably going to be the best direction, because you then have room EQ. You have a little bit more control. I mean, maybe the WIIM has PEQ and stuff, but none of the other ones do. You're just going to have more control over a secondhand AVR. And if you want to expand the system later, you've got that functionality as well. But I've never been a fan of Hios. And if streaming music's a big thing, then I'm partial to Blue Sound or Sonos. I've never used the WIIM app.
Why do you not like Hios? I love Hios. I always
I don't
recommend
know.
it.
I don't really like the app. I don't know.
The new app, the interface that they changed, or the old app? Because they changed it about 6 or 8 months ago. I actually think it's worse than it used to be.
The old one. I don't
The
know.
old one is where you had all your different sound services and you could click into it. And the new one doesn't, like, you don't really know which sound service you're in. You click play and it's like, it kind of just draws from all of them that you have logged into.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
I've
I like
never
that.
been a. I think the reason I like the other ones more is because they integrate seamlessly in with all of these other devices. Like a lot of people do Sonos or Blue Sound, and then it integrates in with your sound bar, with a wireless sub, with all of this stuff, which all of us would. But there's a place for all of that. The majority of the populace are just going to want a sound bar, and they're going to want some streaming speakers, and they're going to want this stuff. And I think Sonos and Blue Sound have done it remarkably well, where you can pick zones, and not that you can't do that with Hios, but it just seems to work really well.
I'm partial to the Blue Sound stuff. I just like their apps and the user interface, and it just works. It's very, very polished.
Yeah.
But I haven't used Hios. I've only used that in Sonos.
And just to MW, the Blue Sound stuff, Sonos has it too. At least their new amp does. You have sub crossovers and stuff, so you're not losing out there. But it's an expense. It can be quite a bit more expensive than an older AVR for sure. Anybody else have anything? Chat wasn't all about asking questions.
Do you guys have any experience with mixing boards, like front of house, houses of worship, that kind of stuff?
Doug does.
I run a soundboard at church, so it's not that I'm unfamiliar, but I want to buy something smaller, like maybe 8 channels for occasionally using outside, like parties, that kind of thing. I was just curious if you guys have recommendations. If you don't have any
trying to do,
well, some live sound stuff, or actually an outdoors like church picnic. So I probably want like 8 channels or something, just small board. I went to Guitar Center today to kind of put some hands on some of the stuff, and it was all boxed up, so I didn't get to have the hands-on experience that I wanted.
The last one I used was that Behringer wireless one that you control all digitally on your computer.
Yes.
So that
how did you like that? I mean, this is a different direction the podcast normally goes, but if you're controlling everything here, I was thinking like if you got some feedback or something, you need to get to it quick. That's not fast. Log into my phone and
I used it for Twitch streaming, so it wasn't. I didn't need to do
Not
it
live
quickly.
sound.
No,
Yeah.
so the physical stuff definitely has its
Oh, there you go.
benefits. I don't think you need anything extravagant.
I do like the digital ones you're talking about because I was reading up on those a little bit. Everyone can use their own phone as their own little, board. So if I'm playing guitar and I want more guitar and less piano and less drums, I can dial it in and use headphones out of my phone or whatever. And everybody has their own little board. So if you have 8 or 12 channels, you can have 8 or 12 iPhones or Androids connected to it, and they're all running their own sound. And you as a master operator get, full control of everything. So that's cool. I just don't know if I like the idea of it being on the phone from the standpoint of live sound and all the little caveats that come with that.
Yeah. I agree.
So a big manual board might still be the.
I think in your situation, if you're doing it for your own outdoor stuff, a manual board would probably be the best bet. That'd be the direction I'd probably go.
There you go, Richard. I'll hook up with you after the podcast tonight and see what you got. Richard's saying he knows some ideas from me.
Anybody else?
City guys.
I'm just trying to figure out who Jesse Plemons is because
I don't know who that is either. Jesse Plemons.
I looked him up and he's I don't think you look at all like him, honestly. Well, I guess I can see a little bit. Just a little. Yeah, I see the resemblance.
All right. Official last question, because I think this guy needs some help. Justin Baker asks, I'm trying to get fuller sound from movies. Is increasing crossover to 120 or higher something that might help, or should I be playing with speaker calibration and bump some mid-frequencies up? Justin, I need some more information. What do you mean by fuller?
And what speakers are you using? And all that, what kind of subs are you using? Like, yeah, let's get some more information on that.
I don't really recommend going any higher than 120 with your crossover. That 120 is already pretty high.
Or using sealed subs and ported subs, that'll feed into it, or horn subs.
Yeah.
That'll feed into your answer.
Yeah, it could be some cancellation or some phasing problems going on in your setup. You could be sitting in a null. I don't think a lot of people realize that they're missing things because they're sitting in a null. So MW, I think, said it right here. Measure. Get a measurement mic. I know that's a little bit of an expense. Get a measurement mic and measure. At your main listening position, do a frequency response and see what's happening. Because you may be like, oh, it doesn't sound very full because male vocals are just going, and there's a big null where you're sitting. Try and sit in different positions. Try and move your subs around. But the first thing I would do to establish baseline is measure. Jonathan, would you mess with your crossover? You run a little bit higher crossover, don't you?
I like 90. I like 90.
100.
I think it's fun to experiment with that. And I do think that you should change your crossover and measure it, because I've always observed that Odyssey doesn't necessarily get that right, and your different audio EQs don't necessarily get that right. So sometimes by simply just changing your crossover from it, maybe it sets it to 70 hertz and you change to 90, or it sets it to 80, you set it to 100, that kind of thing, or down, you'll notice that you'll get, if you do no smoothing on your measurement, instead of being a nice smooth transition between your subs and your speakers, you might have like a big dip there, and it's because it did it wrong. It chose a crossover point that's not ideal for your setup, your room, your placement stuff. So if you just by changing it 10 hertz, you can adjust the smoothness or the integration of that crossover. And I've seen that very firsthand many times in my room.
Well, not only that, not only adjusting the crossover point, but also adjusting the delays between the speaker and the subs, because they may be out of alignment and you may be getting some cancellation problems that are creating nulls in the crossover region. So if they're not time aligned, you could also be creating some significant issues that are causing a not full sound.
So Finster says, are you talking about just subwoofer frequencies when you're talking measurement? And the answer is no. You need to measure your subwoofer integrated into your main speakers. So you're validating that crossover point's good and that you don't have any little phase issues. And you can do that with no smoothing on your graphs, at least initially, and then knock it down to like 1/3 to 1/6, in my opinion, when you're setting up PEQ and setting up your EQ changes.
I don't
So
know
that
how
you're doing more general changes.
MW, I don't know how they feel about doing an LR24 to an LR48. I feel like that's pretty aggressive. I guess it depends on how hot your room curve is. Like, how hot are your subs? Because if they're really hot and you're running a LR48, I mean, you're boosting a lot of those frequencies way up there. But teach their own. LR24 is typically the standard. I guess it just depends on what your house curve is, in my experience, and what you like.
Look at this. A JVC RS 600
bucks.
$150. I'll take that.
Somebody got robbed.
That's a great price, man. Congrats.
That's like a tenth of what that probably should have sold for.
Yeah, I think that's about right, actually. Probably
$1,500.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wonder what the bulb life's like on it, though.
If you get probably worn out, it's probably why they sold us for so cheap. Get a new bulb in there and you'll be super impressed. That's a very pretty picture. It's got some of the highest contrast of any of the JVCs, actually. That 600
any projector
is really high contrast. It's one
ones. Content type switching sucks.
It's like 35 seconds
forever.
Which HDMI handshake. Yeah.
Its HDR is not the greatest.
Not good at all. I don't even know if it does it. Does it do it at all? I think 520, 540 is where they started doing more HDR stuff. I don't know. It's been a long time.
I don't even remember what
it's got a pretty picture. You hook Mad VR up with that, and you'll be really happy with the results.
And you're talking about the free software.
Yes, I am because I'm cheapskate. But Mad VR Envy, if you have
no.
He's not buying $150 projector.
Exactly. I was emphasizing that. Like, yes, absolutely. God, that was a $10,000 projector. 1080p.
So this gentleman's saying get a Lumigen and run it, and we can. How much? This might be a question that Kevin would know. Kevin, what's a 1080p Lumigen sell for? Since you had one of those at some point fairly recently.
See, I got mine from Nile for
say used market.
1,500. So I sold it for 700 and something, I think.
Dang.
That was 2020.
So maybe they're 500-ish now. Maybe I'm just guessing. I don't know. I haven't followed those. Something like that would be you could get a 1080p one. That's fine with the RS 600. It'll look great.
That's a steal though. $150.
Bulb has 400 hours on it. That's not very many hours. If it's
depends on if it's an OEM bulb or if it was from somebody. It's like some third party or something. Who knows? But a great projector.
Just set here. The easy button is just set on your streamer apps. Just set it to SDR only, like 4K SDR. You can do it with Roku. You can do it with Apple TV. Where it won't even, a lot of the streaming services have like 4K rips where they don't even have HDR on it, or they'll do the conversion for you. When I had my 5040 UB, that's what I had to do. The Epson 5040 UB had terrible HDR. So I set my streaming services up with the Roku. It was the best of the group for some reason on the way that works. Set it to only do SDR. Don't allow it to HDR. And your feeds from your streaming apps will then come across as SDR. And it'll look great. That RS600 will look great like that.
Mosen asks, I'm looking to upgrade my dedicated home theater system right now. I'm using 5.2.4 setup with a Yamaha RX A2085. I've switched to 9.2.4 configuration with either the Anthem or the Denon 6800H. Will it significantly enhance my experience? Thoughts?
So 5 to 9. He's going to get wides.
I like wides.
And he's going to get rear surrounds. And those two things will enhance his experience.
Yes. That they will. And the other benefit is the 6800, I think, is significantly upgradable. But I feel like he doesn't need to go to the 6800. Yes, he does. He's 9.4. Never mind. And then he'll need a secondary amp because the 6800 is 11 channels. I believe, of amplification.
Well, he'd have it though. That's 11 speakers, 9.2. He wouldn't need extra
No, that's
amplification.
9.2.4. It's 2 subs.
Oh, what am I doing?
What are you doing?
Brain short circuit.
What are you doing? It's 13.
Yeah. You will need an external amp.
You need an external amp on that because the 6800, I believe, is 11 channels, and the 4800 and the 3800 are 9 amplified channels. So the 6800 will process 13, but it will not amplify 13. So you'd need an amp. I think it'd be awesome.
I do. I
like
actually.
wides.
I think wides make a big difference, and it probably might depend on your room a little bit. But spatial audio for Apple Music, Dolby Atmos audio has a lot of wide usage. Like they're nice for spatial audio, and for movies and for upmixing and stuff, they're beneficial too. I really like my wides.
I think they're good. If the room is set up properly and you have enough separation and you're not just putting speakers right next to each other and, gotta be done right. But I think that would help. Either way. No other questions. This is where we call it. Anybody else? Before we go and gone?
Radiance Pro for the tone mapping. Zachary says you will need a Radiance Pro for tone mapping. Going back to the RS600. I don't know what a Radiance Pro is.
It's Lumagen? A Lumagen. Yeah.
Okay. What is that, a particular model in the Lumagen family?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I haven't really followed Lumagen that much then.
So Mosin asked one more time, which one do you recommend, Anthem or Denon? Anybody?
Is that 1140 in the same caliber as 6800? I thought you'd have to go to like an AVM 70 to get to the same caliber as 6800.
I'm not a fan of Anthem's video out capability. I think they're kind of problematic.
I'm looking up Anthem 1440.
I would go Denon, personally. And Mosin, if you're in the States, because I don't know if anybody in chat is in the States unless I talked to you before, shoot me a message and we can see about getting you taken care of. Asked about the Albeno. I didn't see a question about the AV10. Can you ask it again?
Okay.
And while Jonathan's looking up the Anthem versus Denon question, Rhythmic G25 HP versus JTR RS1.
So the Anthem 1440 is 15 channels processing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got 2 more channels than the Denon. The Denon 6800 is 13 channels.
How many sub channels? Is that 15 channels total?
I'm trying to find this. It's not in the description.
I'm going to guess that includes sub channels.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to have 4 sub channels. You got to go up to the AVM 90 in the Anthem lineup to get 4 sub channels, as far as I know, off the top of my head.
Yeah,
we're doing this on the fly, guys. I'm not familiar with this particular processor.
Yeah, the 1140's got 2 sub outs. I would do the Denon because it has 4 independent sub outs. They've got a more stable video side. I've had too many problems on the video side with Anthem with unstable HDMI connections. Personal preference.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it on many a show. Denon and Marantz have a pretty good lock on the processor section and the AVR settings because they just have a very mature product and they have a little bit higher feature set. You pay a little bit for it, but they really rank high on ASR as far as like noise to signal to noise ratio. They're just a good product. They really are solid.
G25 HP from Rhythmic or RS1?
I am in this hobby. What happened to me? I haven't looked at the G25. Let me look that one up.
Rhythmic's big guy. I think it's dual 15s.
Sometimes when I'm on this show, I'm like, do I do home theater?
I don't know. Do you? You're moving to the pro side with mixing boards.
G25. It's got a couple 15s in it. They're the servo controlled subwoofers like Rhythmic likes to do. So basically, is this like 2 FV15s or 2 of their? It looks like it's probably just dual opposed in relation to their normal, 15-inch driver, which I really like Rhythmic's product. I've said it from the very beginning when I first heard them 10 or 15 years ago.
They're
Rhythmic
really
has a
good.
very good product.
How much is it?
$29.50.
Okay, so a little bit cheaper than the RS1. It's going to be quite a bit bigger though. They're both good.
Is he talking about RS1 or RS2?
RS1.
So dual opposed has a little advantage, in my opinion.
Yep.
Because there's two drivers, because they're both active, sometimes that can help a little bit in your room with modes and nulls over a single driver. Your output's probably going to be pretty similar between the two.
Yep.
If I was a betting man, I would bet that Rhythmic's a little bit cleaner than the RS1 because it's and don't put too much stock in it, but I've heard enough Rhythmic integrations to know their subs are pretty darn clean because that servo keeps them out of distortion. And Jeff does a really good job with his amplifiers and his mating and stuff. So I'm not saying JTR is a bad choice here at all. The servo design on those subwoofers is designed to like prevent it from going into distortion. So it kind of like won't let it make bad sounds in a way. Like we had a subwoofer shootout where there was a Rhythmic FV15 HP, and we did it in order from price low to price high. And there were quite a few subwoofers below the Rhythmic FV15 HP. This is years ago at Gorilla 83's house on the forums. The FV15 HP, in my opinion, was the first subwoofer in that subwoofer shootout where you got to top tier, where it didn't make any bad sounds. The servo controlled it. You basically can't make it make bad sounds. Like it reins in the driver when it starts getting out of control. That's the whole design aspect of it. And it sounds really clean. It had plenty of volume. So in my estimation here, and I like JTR, but I'm going to recommend that if it's around the same price, I'm going to recommend that Rhythmic. I think that's a really nice product.
It's a good sub. Albano got back to us about the AV10. He says he purchased an AV10. It comes tomorrow. All speakers will be connected via XLR, but my SVS subs will be connected via RCA because of mini DSP. Will I hear a difference RCA versus XLR?
Wow. I purchased an AV10. Sorry. All speakers will be connected to XLR. The subs are connected to RCA.
Will there be a difference between the XLR and the RCA?
No, the difference will be if you're getting hum or any kind of electronic feedback with RCA, because it's not a balanced wire, so you're more likely to hiccup like a 60 hertz electronic hum or something. If you don't have that, there's not going to be any difference because you can gain match the same level. There's caveats. If your receiver's crud and it doesn't put enough voltage, maybe not. But in most cases, you'll be fine with RCA as long as you don't have electronical interference.
I mean, you could potentially reduce your noise floor in the sub depending on what the voltage and stuff is, but I don't think in most scenarios it's really going to be a problem.
Yeah, if you are not actually physically hearing hum, then you're probably golden.
Yeah. MW asks a good question. What's the cable length? Longer the cable, the more open you are to interference.
Yeah.
It acting as an antenna. Okay, now we're finally done. I keep saying that, and people keep asking questions.
They're good questions.
They are good questions, which is why I keep going to them. His cable length is 3 meters. You're going to be fine.
Oh, yeah.
This is it. I thought it was going to be like 45 minutes, but it's almost 2 hours, so we'll call it here. We got one more, maybe 2 more streams before MWAVE. And then hopefully I'm still alive. I don't die from anxiety. Oh, man. I'm excited, terrified. We'll see how it all goes. This is how it always is before MWAVE.
That's true.
Anything in closing?
Kevin, thanks for being on tonight.
Absolutely.
The room was a pleasure when I was there last week. I think your guests will be very entertained.
Thanks for having me on here, and thanks for coming out the other day too. That was.
Mm-hmm. Oh, one more thing we didn't say, but Chad B did your calibration on your audio, and that was dialed in real nice. So Chad B is a well-known calibrator on AVS forum. He's got a lot of experience and a lot of positive press for his work. And
he did the video also, actually.
Okay. Yeah.
Rusty?
Nothing, man. Oh, getting the last few things ready for MWAVE. Go buy your tickets. ticket sales have been taken off. So
They have people
nice.
procrastinating and waiting till the last minute.
I know.
But guys,
What's our attendance count? What are you at now?
I'm not sure of the total,
Or-
but
I don't know.
Ballpark?
Over
300?
300. We'll be at like 400 by the time the show
Yeah.
rolls around. So that's where I want to be. I don't really want to be much bigger than that. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us. As always, this is the AV Experience Podcast. Michael should be back with us next week if he hasn't fallen off a boat. Hopefully my room will be close to being done next weekend. I hope it is going to be here at least, because if it's not, you may not ever hear from me again, because I'm just going to die from stress. But we'll hope. So, guys, have a great rest of your week. We'll see you next Sunday at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. Have a good one. Enjoy your theaters. Stay safe out there. Talk to you guys next time. See you later.
Bye for
Bye.
now.